Yo, what is going on, everyone? Guiding Light here, and in this one, I'm going to be bringing you guys a bunch of tips and tricks that I've learned while playing the First Descendant. Now, using these tips, I do believe that the game will actually become quite a bit easier for you. There's a lot of little things that you can do when trying to learn the game that are actually going to make it a lot easier. Now, I'm going to explain a bunch of these different tips and tricks that's definitely going to help with bosses, as well as just leveling up and learning the game overall. So if you guys are new to the First Descendant, or if you've been playing a while, I think this will actually help quite a few of you out. So jumping right into it, we actually have the very first tip. Now, this tip is going to help you guys with your movement, but not only that, it's going to help quite a bit with boss fights as well. So if you open up your settings menu, there's a few settings that I highly suggest turning on. This will help quite a bit with completing most missions in the game, but most importantly during boss fights. Now, if you come into your settings, you want to go to options, and then you want to go over to the gameplay section. Scroll all the way down to the very bottom, and there's actually a few settings down here which I highly suggest turning on. The first one is going to be grappling hook correction guide. Now, what this does is it's actually going to show you guys exactly when you cannot activate your grapple. Now, using this setting, it actually helps an extreme amount when fighting any of the bosses in the game. You'll notice that sometimes when you go to break onto boss's armor, or when you just go to grapple in general, sometimes it won't connect and you'll just keep throwing your grapple out for nothing. But when you apply these specific settings, it will actually help you to grapple guaranteed every single time. Now, after you turn on the grapple setting, be sure to go into these damage display settings as well. Turn all of these on, and when it says show status effect, make sure it says on enemy. What this is going to do is it's actually going to show you guys exactly what damage type you are doing with your weapon. It's also going to show you guys what damage type the enemies are weak to. And then if you get hit with a poison damage, or if you end up poisoning one of the enemies, hitting them with any sort of status effect, it will actually show you. So before it would just hit them, but you wouldn't see it, and you just wonder where all the damage was coming from. With these settings, it will actually show you exactly where all the damage is coming from and who it's being dealt to. So what you want to do is turn all of that on, and then you want to come down here and look at the grappling hook correction guide. What you'll want to do is actually turn this on, and you'll notice that you have a couple of different options. Go ahead and pick the option with the red circle and the dotted lines around it. Now, what this will do is when you go into grapple and when you're moving around the map, you'll notice that the red circle will pop up periodically. What this red circle means is that you're guaranteed to hit your grapple on the next time that you press the button. So this helps quite a bit when fighting the bosses. If you've ever gone against the really, really high level bosses and you've gone to break their armor, you've noticed sometimes maybe that you can't even connect to their armor and you're just sitting there standing in front of the boss taking massive damage. Now, this setting can help a lot, not just with the bosses, but with just about anything, because you'll know for a fact if your grapple is going to connect or not. If that red circle doesn't pop up, then you know that you won't connect when you go and pull the trigger. Now, I'll show you guys most notably where this makes a difference. If you're ever on these boss fights and you notice that you have to break off these bosses' armor, a lot of times it can be extremely, extremely hard, almost impossible to connect to some of these bosses. Now, I've noticed when using this setting, it's almost guaranteed every single time that you'll be able to get onto the person's crit spot. So next time that you have to grapple onto one of the enemies, just simply use this setting. And what you'll want to do is just go up the same way you would normally grapple to them. But now what you'll do is you'll wait until that red circle pops up. And what this will do is it'll guarantee that fact that you'll actually connect with the grapple. This way you'll never end up getting stuck in one of the boss fights, not being able to deal damage. So you'll know as soon as that red circle pops up that you'll be able to connect. And now this has actually made a big difference when doing a lot of boss fights, because the difference between being able to break their armor means that you'll be able to stun them. And then if you're not taking any damage, then you don't have to worry about getting revived. Trust me when I tell you that this effect can make a big difference. Now, not only that, but you can stack those settings up with this new ability as well called Absolute Curse. What this does is any time that you break one of the boss's armor pieces, it will actually send out a buff or a debuff essentially to every single buff that the boss had. Now, this can be used on any of the bosses in the game, and it actually can make quite a bit of difference knowing that the boss doesn't have all of his status effects. Now, if you remember those settings I suggested back at the beginning of the video where you turn on weapon damage details, skill damage details, show HP and shield values, things like that, you want to turn all of these settings on. And then when it says show status effect text, you want to go ahead and put that on enemy players only. Now, what this setting will do is it will actually display the exact damage type in which you are doing when you go to fight an enemy. Not only that, but if you scan the enemies, you can click R3 and scan any enemy in the game, and it will actually tell you what they're weak to, like what element they're weak to. So as you can see, we're fighting Dead Bride right now, and this boss is weak to fire damage, and I have a fire damaged weapon on. As you can see, every time I shoot, you're going to see the status effect on the right, those red icons. This is the game showing me that, okay, the weapon you're using is doing some fire damage, and you can do this with every weapon in the game and every element status effect essentially in the game. Now, I find this helps quite a bit, especially when going up against hard mode, because you'll go into a bunch of different rooms. There'll be all these ads. You don't necessarily know what it is that they're weak to. Now, there is a function in the game where if you just simply scan your environment, it will pop up and tell you exactly what every enemy in the room is weak to. And it actually can help quite a bit if you're ever having trouble clearing out certain rooms or going up against certain enemies. Eventually, once you learn what they're all weak to, you can counter it and do considerably more damage to these types of enemies. All you have to do is click the R3 button or scan the environment, and what it will do is it will bring up the health bars above the enemies, and if you look closely right next to it, you'll see the element that they are weak to. So for example, on this one, you can see that green icon above the enemy's name, and what this means is that that enemy is weak to toxic damage. So anytime that I deal toxic damage to that enemy, it's going to do considerably more damage. Now, when you do this in all of the missions, especially the hard level intercept battles, it will make a considerable difference in the amount of damage output you can do. Also, you can realize the damage type that they're doing, and you can put on defense perks to counteract the damage that they're doing to you as well. So when you go into your weapons, you're going to be able to apply certain weapons, which apply status effect to your weapon. What this means is that you can force your weapon to do certain types of damage like fire, chill, or even electricity. But what some people don't realize is that you can actually stack these elements and you can do multiple elements all at the same time. So if you want your weapon to do fire damage and electric damage all at the same time, there are ways to actually make this happen. So when using the mod crafting system, you want to pay attention to the different types of mods there are. You'll notice that certain mods are different colors. And when you go to apply two of the same mods that are the same color, sometimes it will not allow you to apply them. For example, when you try to apply two red mods, it'll say that you can't. Or when you try to apply two yellow or purple mods, it will also say that you cannot do it. But keep in mind, guys, you can actually apply multiple blue and purple mods, and a lot of them have the same functions. So if you have a mod that does fire damage in purple, but then you have another mod that does chill damage in blue, you can actually stack these up with each other. Keep in mind, you can stack as many blue and purple mods as you like. This works for descendants and weapons. So sometimes you may not be able to get better benefits by equipping two of the same purples, but what you can do is you can use your lower level blue mods to get even better benefits that you may not have been able to equip due to the fact that you can't equip two of the same purple mods. Now, it may be confusing, but once you get into build crafting and realize that you can do all these tricks, it will actually make creating builds much easier, and you can actually come up with a lot more creative things that do a lot more damage. Another thing to keep in mind is to be slotting in crystallization catalysts to your favorite weapons. Now, what these crystallization catalysts do is it does reset your weapon level back to 0. However, what it's going to do is it's going to make it so that you can select a module socket type. What this is going to do is you want to look at these icons, and you can match up these icons with the same icons that are on the mods themselves that you want to apply to the weapon. So for example, we have these piercing mods. If I apply one of these mod sockets to my weapon, what it's going to do is it's going to make all of the piercing mods cost less when I go to apply them. So you may not want to stack up the exact same type of module sockets on the weapons. You want to scatter it around and make it a few different types of module sockets. But what it does is once it's equipped, your weapon will actually become twice as strong. So you might not want to just be throwing these on just about every weapon you have, but your top 3 DPS weapons, your top 3 favorite weapons, you do want to be slotting in crystallization catalysts, as every single time you do it, your weapon will become considerably stronger, and you can stack this strength buff over 10 times on the weapon, meaning that if you ever really do put in the maximum amount of catalysts, you will be able to have one of the strongest weapons in the game. Now, you can do this with the descendants and the weapons, but keep in mind that some of those materials can take a while to farm and are not as easy to come by. So you want to maybe not waste them all too early on in the game if you're just getting started. Now, the next tip I have for you is going to be when you're out and about just free roaming or running missions. What you want to make sure that you're doing occasionally is periodically scanning your environment. What you may notice when you scan your environment is that you're going to get these white diamonds that pop up and show you where loot is through the walls. Now, at first, you may not realize that or how important this is, but when you go to craft most of the higher level stuff or anything in the game that you really are going to want, you'll notice that most of the materials that you need, most of the resources, they're going to come out of these boxes. So if periodically throughout running missions or when you're just free roaming around, you're scanning the environment and picking up these boxes, it can save you a considerable amount of time later down the road when you go to farm out certain descendants, weapons, or materials. You'll already have a lot of them. If you're doing this every single mission you play or every time you free roam, you're never going to run out of resources. You're pretty much always going to have them. The first day or two, you might not have any, but after you get in the habit of doing this on a daily basis or every mission you run, you will have a stockpile from all of the different destinations, and you won't really have to worry too much about farming because it can be extremely tedious in this game. Now, the next tip I have for you is to definitely take a look at the perks in which your weapons get. Now, you'll notice if you've been playing a while that you'll start to get duplicates of the exact same weapon which drop. Sometimes they're going to have higher DPS, sometimes they're not. You may be wondering which ones you should scrap, which ones you should keep. Should I keep maybe 2 or 3 of the exact same weapons? Like, what's going on here? So, very quickly, I want to give you guys some tips and tricks and some of the perks that you definitely want to be looking out for. Now, anytime that you get a weapon, you're going to notice that it has all of these different perks or rules on it. Now, these perks or these roles are what's going to determine your overall DPS with that weapon. Now, it's good to keep in mind that the certain weapons are actually 100% going to be better against certain enemies or in different areas. For example, this weapon has a benefit on it, which it's going to do bonus damage to any boss that I face. Now, obviously, when using this weapon against a boss, or when going up against some of the very hard high level bosses, you're going to want to have these perks on your weapons. It's also really good to keep in mind that these perks will have bonus damage versus certain enemies. As you can see here, this one does bonus damage versus Legion of Immortality. Now, when you stack these perks up with different mods, you'll see considerable damage output changes with the weapons when going up against the proper enemies. This can most notably be seen on snipers, and there's even certain hard mode bosses or even certain bosses during the hard infiltration missions, which you will definitely want to use these benefits on. You'll see that some of these bosses become much easier if you just keep your distance and you use your sniper with these additional perks on it. You can do a lot more damage. Now, if you're wondering what type of element you're doing, if you have 2 different types of elements equipped, if you do have those settings on, I suggested at the beginning of the video, when you go to damage an enemy, you'll see that different elements pop up. We've got the fire popping up in red and those white diamonds showing that I'm also doing chill damage. Now, keep in mind, if you already have one version of the weapon, even if it's level 20, you only need to farm out one of these weapons. Now, if you're looking for a really, really good roll on a weapon or a weapon that does specifically more damage to a boss or something like that, I'll show you exactly how you can get one very easily. Also, keep in mind, you can bring up in the stats about any weapon. It'll break down every single little stat, and then it'll even show you if you've already put a mod slot in there or anything like that. So if you really have a weapon you like, or you're curious as to how much damage it does, be sure to bring open those details and you can get a full breakdown of what the weapon does, at what range the weapon does more damage, and things like that. Now, if you have a lower level weapon and you want to make it stronger, what you can do is you can come over to this transmission station. I'm sure a lot of you guys already know this, but I want to explain it a little bit more. What you can do is you can take the rolls on your weapon and you can actually change them. Now, you may want to be a little cautious when doing this. If you already have a good roll or an extremely high DPS, be cautious because re-rolling the weapon, it can lower the DPS. So you may want to get a duplicate of the weapon you want to change and then mess with it from there. However, keep in mind, every time that you roll one of these weapons, it's going to drop with new perks. But what you want to keep an eye out on are the colors as well. You'll see some of them are purple, some of them are blue. You can even get some of them to turn gold. Now, just like the rarity on the weapons and drops, the rarity of the roll on the weapon is going to be the same. So if you can get all golds instead of just all blues, it's actually going to perform even better. So just keep that in mind when re-rolling the weapons. Now, if you don't want to re-roll the weapons, because as you can see, it's going to cost materials that you maybe don't want to waste, just simply rerun the missions and farm the drops. That's how you're going to get better rolls, is just by simply getting more and more of the exact same weapon to drop. But if you're tired of grinding for the same weapon and you already have 3 or 4 of them, you can just simply re-roll it and find the perfect roll that you want. Or you can create maybe one roll for bosses, one roll for missions. It's totally up to you, but I wanted to let you guys know about this feature. Now, the next tip I have for you is to go into your Descendants mods. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you have one of these sub modules equipped. Now, if you look very closely, you're going to see that anytime you equip one of these sub modules, it will say that you increase max module capacity for each level that this mod has. Now, you can do this with either the grappling mod or even a melee mod. There's certain grappling mods which will actually make it so that you can grapple more, and it definitely increases your mobility quite a bit. So if you'd like, you can find this multi-maneuvering tool and it'll allow you to grapple extra times. But what you really want to keep in mind is that every time you put on one of these mods in this slot, you want to keep in mind that for every upgrade point that your sub mod has, it will actually get applied to your overall character. So if you take a look here at the overall points which you will receive, right now I'm at 47, but as soon as I equip this maxed out level submod, what it will do is it will give me those 10 points back. So not only do I get the benefits from the submod, like the extra mobility or the extra melee damage, but now I've actually got 10 extra points, which I can use for my build to become even stronger. Now, the next tip I want to show you actually does tie into this pretty well because there's actually a hidden melee feature that you may not know about. Now, when going up against very, very strong enemies, or if you're ever in a cluster and you're surrounded by like 20, 30 enemies in a giant pile, you may or may not know that you can actually do a slam down melee attack. Now, this attack will be the same on all descendants, and depending on the melee weapon you have or whether your melee is charged up, will depend on the damage output that it does. But the biggest tip with it is that if you're ever going up against these really big enemies or the ones that have shields or have immunities, what you can do is you can use this slam attack, this slam down melee attack. And what it will do is it will send a shockwave out when you land. This is going to stagger and all of the enemies around you and it will send them to the ground for about 5 to 10 seconds. Now, if you're ever going up against a very big enemy, or if you ever find yourself in a cluster just surrounded by like 10, 15 enemies, what you can do is you can use this melee function, and that shockwave blast will save you. It will blast all of the enemies that are around you into this stagger effect where they fall on the floor. You do have to make sure that your melee is charged up, but the craziest thing is that it realistically comes back about every 5 to 10 seconds or so. So you can use this ability to knock the enemies over and get guaranteed crits and make it so that they can't even do DPS because they're constantly being staggered quite often. Now, I wouldn't build my entire build around this, but to be fair, there's certain descendants that you really could build your entire class around this setup if you really wanted to. Now, this game's only been out a week, and I can notice that this video is getting very, very long. So as of right now, those are all the tips and tricks that I'm going to give you. Whether you're a beginning player or just starting hard mode or some of the bosses, I really, really think that this will help you guys out. I know this game can be extremely hard to learn at times, so hopefully this does make things a bit easier. Now, if you guys know any tips and tricks yourself, be sure to leave them down in the comments. And let me know if you want me to make any more tips and tricks videos in the future, because I'm definitely enjoying this game so far. So hope this helps you out, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.